So if you spent any time on the channel recently, you notice that I really love Ultraman because I keep making videos about it. And because of that, I want to share that gift of love of Ultraman to all of you. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to watch Ultraman. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome to my Ultraman viewing guide. I have previously done viewing guides on the Power Rangers franchise, covering not only its TV shows and movies, but also its comic books, and I have covered the Kamen Rider franchise, focusing in on its main movie and TV media. And if you haven't checked those out, go check them out now. But today it's Ultraman's turn. Just like with those other viewing guides, this is going to be intended for someone who's never seen Ultraman, or someone that has an interest in Ultraman, or someone that has seen Ultraman trying to figure out what they want to watch next. It's a multi-rounded organizational system. So because of that, if you do enjoy this, please hit the like button to let me know you do enjoy this, because I do want to do more of these viewing guides in the future. And also hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. But for Ultraman, it is a 55-year-old franchise, starting back in 1966 with Ultra Q, as well as the follow-up, Ultraman. The Ultra series is fantastic. It has such a wide range and wide variation of styles and sort of just different versions of the concept, but also keeping a lot of the core tenets that keep it interesting and unique. You can definitely tell what is and isn't an Ultraman show just by looking at it, and I think that's very special to the franchise. It has never really lost its identity. Now, in terms of actually covering Ultraman, it can be kind of tricky to do a viewing guide. For example, like I said, 55 years of history, and not all of that has been a continually running TV show with something like Kamen Rider or Super Sentai, where year after year there's always a show. Ultraman has mixed it up a lot. So we are going to break it down, and I'm going to provide continuity notes. Because with Ultraman, they tend to have a lot more crossovers due to the nature of what Ultraman is. And let's talk about what Ultraman is for those that may not be aware. Ultraman is a being made of light energy from the land of light who comes to Earth in order to stop kaiju from destroying it, or roughly therein, depending on which show you go with. The Ultraman will bond with a human partner, or take on a human form, or a human may become an Ultraman, depending on the series. So there's different ways for someone to transform into an Ultraman. But in the nature of it being a tokusatsu franchise that has henshin hero aspects, such as somebody becoming Ultraman, there is a lot of those great tenets of the Monster of a Week format where you have a new kaiju to fight each week. But like I said, some of the shows will mix that up depending on who they are. The basic tenets of Ultraman is that you have a giant of light, who is your main hero, who bonds with a human, is part of a special defense force. That defense force helps fight the kaiju on Earth's behalf, but also works with Ultraman most times, and they work together in conjunction without necessarily having an official partnership. It's kind of the idea that Earth is out to also defend itself and not rely on Ultraman, but Ultraman's help is always appreciated. And that is one of the core themes of Ultraman, the hopeful message that if you work together, anything can be accomplished. And that has stayed very true to the franchise throughout its entire history. And in fact, that is one of my favorite things about it, the cooperation between Ultraman and the humans in each show. Now, with that being said, some of them don't have defense teams, some of them go for a different approach, and we'll talk about those as we go along. But that's the core basics of Ultraman. Here's how the Ultraman universe works. Most series take place in their own separate Earth. Now, mention here, I'm saying Earth, not universe. Because as we've seen future crossovers, the Ultraman hail from the Land of Light typically, some come from other planets, but that Land of Light seems to be a central hub for multiple different universes of Earth. Because we see the Ultramans travel to Earths that never had Ultraman before, but then cross over with guys from previous shows. So when it comes down to it, you want to be able to distinguish those different versions. And at the end of the day, you have sort of this hub center of Land of Light, and then all these multiple Earths. And I'm going to mention which shows are connected on the same Earth, because there are a few of those. So with that said, we're going to take a look at 3 eras of Ultraman, which is how we're breaking this down. We have the Showa Era, and then we have the Heisei Era, and the New Generation Era in the 2010s. So let's begin with the Showa Era. So the Showa Era of Ultraman is essentially like getting a kaiju movie on your TV. That's how it was pitched, and it was kind of how they played the series. A lot of these have the classic elements that you would see in Godzilla films or other kaiju films, but put into a half-hour TV episode. It also helps that the original creator of Ultraman, Eiji Tsuburaya, was a special effects supervisor for many Godzilla films, so he brought that experience to the Ultra series. But before we get into Ultraman, let's talk about Ultra Q. Ultra Q is where this all began in 1966 with the 28-episode series, Ultra Q. This was essentially humans investigating monster-related incidents. Not necessarily kaiju, giant monsters, but kind of like normal-sized monsters or aliens. The basis of a lot of the standard Ultra kaiju and monsters and aliens that we would see sort of come from this series. And the general idea that week to week there was a different kaiju or monster that kind of became a staple of Ultraman. Now, Ultra Q has actually gone on to be a little sub-series of Ultraman. And I want to mention these here because while you can watch Ultra Q on the Mill Creek Blu-ray or several streaming versions, the others are a little bit harder to get. For example, Ultra Q the movie, Legend of the Stars, was a reboot of Ultra Q in 1990, followed up with a 2004 series, Ultra Q Dark Fantasy, lasting 26 episodes. Neither of those you can actually watch legally, so good luck finding them. And then there was the 2013 Neo Ultra Q, which did receive a Mill Creek Blu-ray, and that has a similar styling to the original Ultra Q series. But let's start Ultraman. We're also going to be tagging as the main Showa Era universe. And I'm calling it this because it gets a little complicated, but we're going to talk about the main Showa Era universe. If you see that tag up there, that means it's part of the main universe, and we are going to go sequentially here. So starting off, 1966, Ultraman lasted for 39 episodes. This was the classic series that saw the beginning of the franchise. It has the setup that Ultraman comes to Earth, accidentally kills one of the SSSP members, Shin Hayata, and bonds with him to become Ultraman on Earth, though he has a limited time he can fight, at only 3 minutes at a time. So that's basically the basics of the franchise, and it runs sort of basic. You're going to see the beginning tropes, you're going to be seeing kind of how the series started to shape its identity. Ultraman is a good start if you've never seen an Ultra show, but be ready to watch 1960s kaiju action. It can get a little weird if you're more used to a modern setting. But this did see the introduction of Ultra Warriors Ultraman and Zophie. And I'm going to be mentioning the Ultra Warriors simply because they come up a lot in crossovers, so you can refer back and find out, hey, which show did they come from? Now, interestingly, there is an alternate universe sequel to this series. A deviation of this universe was seen in the Ultraman anime adapting the manga of the same name. From 2019 to 2023, this aired exclusively on Netflix and is still available, I believe, worldwide. This is an alternate universe where Ultraman left at the end of the original series, slight spoiler, and there was never any future Ultra stories in that universe. And the humans essentially create their own technology based on the Ultraman that become exosuit armors. This features Ultramans not as giants of light, but as people in exosuits, and it's a bit of a different take. It's also a cool anime. You could watch it without watching the original series, but they do reference that original series quite a bit. Alright, now the next proper follow-up is 1967's Ultraseven, lasting for 49 episodes, and introducing us to the Ultra Warrior Ultraseven. This is the second entry into the main Showa universe. However, it doesn't have too many callbacks to the previous. Ultraseven is widely regarded as one of the best shows of the franchise, and is one of the most popular. It's a good jumping on point if you want to just jump fresh, but I found it does build on the themes of Ultraman quite well. Now, this also had an alternate universe sequel, which was the Heisei Ultraseven series, featuring the 1994 NTV specials, there was 2 of them, the 1998 Ultraseven 30th Anniversary Memorial Trilogy, the 1999 Ultraseven Final Chapters, which was 6 episodes, and the 5-episode Ultraseven Evolution in 2002. These are all part of an alternate universe where no show happened after Ultraseven, and it did feature the return of Ultraseven's original actor, so it kind of ties it together. So if you want Ultraseven, there's plenty of Ultraseven. Getting back on track with the main universe, the return of Ultraman came in 1971, 4 years after Ultraseven. Return of Ultraman introduced Ultraman Jack, who wasn't known as that at the time. He was Shin Ultraman 2, Ultraman 2, and then eventually Ultraman Jack. But this series kind of brought back the core ideas of the original Ultraman show and brought it into a new, fresher light. I actually think Ultraman Jack is a pretty solid series, and if you want to jump in where the franchise has a little bit more stability on its legs, Jack is a good start with the return of Ultraman. 1972 saw Ultraman Ace lasting for 52 episodes, introducing, of course, Ultraman Ace, as well as the Father of Ultra. This is where the Ultra universe starts to connect together. Ace saw the return of Ultraman, Zophi, and Seven, and Jack, in addition to introducing the Father of Ultra. So it's kind of a really important show for that. It also has the distinction of having 2 human hosts for Ultraman in the beginning. So the first half of the show, Ace is actually 2 different people fusing together to become Ultraman Ace, which is a really cool idea that we haven't really seen since. Followed up in 1973 is Ultraman Taro, which saw the introduction of Ultraman Taro and Mother of Ultra, to go with, of course, Father of Ultra. Ultraman Taro lasted 53 episodes. This takes a little bit of different tone, but it is continuing from Ace, and we do see appearances by the previous Ultra brothers. Ultraman Taro is known as Ultraman number 6 because he is the 6th Ultra brother. In 1984, there was a retelling of the Ultraman story, which essentially included clips from Ultraman through Taro with a little bit of some of the later stuff. And there is a prequel prologue scene which features a kid version of Ultraman Taro. That has not been officially released where all the previous shows have been. So yeah, go looking for it if you want to find it, but it's kind of a neat thing if you're a fan of Taro. In 1974, Ultraman Leo had a 51-episode series, introducing Ultraman Leo, Astra, and Ultraman King. Leo is a martial arts-based hero, and he has Ultraseven as a companion in this series, though he acts a completely different character, which is a little weird. But Ultraman Leo, while it has a lot of depressing episodes, is kind of a crazy high-action adventure due to the martial arts theming. And then in 1980, Ultraman 80. This ran for 50 episodes, introduced us to Ultraman 80 and Yulian. This series is kind of detached from the others. While you have Ultraman through Leo as kind of your main Showa era, and even Mill Creek's Blu-rays have a connecting spine art for them, because 80 came 6 years after that, it feels detached. However, it does still fit in that same connected universe, especially a later series we will talk about in another section connects it all together to make sure that you know it's all one universe. But 80 is a school teacher for the first part of the series, and that is a pretty cool dynamic to have. And then the last thing in the Showa era, part of the main Showa universe, was the 1983 series Andromelos, made up of 45 5-minute episodes. This introduced us to the warrior Andromelos, as well as Andro Wolf, Andro Mars, and Andro Floor. Even though those last 3 have never shown up again, Andromelos has. This saw a series that's a spin-off. It's the first real spin-off for Ultraman. It's not a separate universe, but connected to it, and it starts with the disappearance of Zophi, who was seen in the original Ultraman. And it's kind of a cool connection if you've seen the other shows, but not something you need to seek out on its own, and I don't think it's a good starting point either. It's also not officially available outside of Japan. And then the last Showa era series actually came out between Leo and 80, 1979's The Ultraman, introducing us to Ultraman Jonius, Elec, Lodo, and Amiya. Unfortunately for Elec, Lodo, and Amiya, they have not been seen pretty much ever again, but Jonius makes regular appearances in crossovers. This was a 50-episode series produced by Tsuburaya, who makes Ultraman, as well as Sunrise, who are best known for making Mobile Suit Gundam. And they're actually co-producing the original Mobile Suit Gundam at the same time, so there's a lot of animator overlap, which gives it a unique feel. Also, yeah, I said animator. This thing is the first Ultraman anime to be produced, and for that, it gives it a distinctive look and feel, as well as being its own distinctive universe. As far as I know, it's never been confirmed that Jonius' show took place in the same Earth as any of the others. This is a landmark moment for Ultraman because it broke out of just being a live-action series and had an animated series that gave it a lot of freshness. But that is the end of the Showa era, because everything we do from here is going to be the Heisei era and beyond. So with the Showa era of Japanese history having ended, because that's how history works, they moved on to a new era of Ultraman. Unfortunately, Tsuburaya wasn't doing well financially after Ultraman 80. They sort of were not doing great. So the beginning part of the Heisei era was really wishy-washy on a lot of material, where we would eventually go to see the Heisei era be having longer shows and more drama-style filmmaking. In the beginning, they were trying some different things. So let's talk about the weird spin-offs that you may come across in a Google search that aren't good entry points, and I don't even know why I'm bringing them up, but hey, let's make sure you know what these are. So first of all, 1984 saw a TV special for Ultraman Kids, an anime series where all the Ultraman are kids. In 1992, this got a 26-episode follow-up, which is what is released on the Mill Creek DVD. The original special hasn't been released, but that DVD set does exist, and I believe the show is now on streaming. So if you really want to watch it, it's out there. All right, so let's talk about Tsuburuya's international market push, because it was sort of misconceived that Tsuburuya has recently been pushing Ultraman to the international market. They've been trying since 1987, starting with 1987's Ultraman The Adventure Begins, also known as Ultraman USA. This is an anime film that was originally supposed to be a pilot to a TV series, and that never really came forth, but we did get a really cool anime film out of it. This actually takes place in the United States and features fighter pilots Scott, Chuck, and Beth becoming Ultraman Scott, Ultraman Chuck, and the first ever Ultrawoman, Beth. These three have actually gone on to have a bit of a legacy and appearing in modern crossovers. So yeah, check out this film. It hasn't been officially released over in the United States since that original VHS release it had, but it did get a nice Blu-ray remaster in Japan with English dub, so you can find the film pretty easily. Following up that, we got more co-productions, because Ultraman USA was a co-production with Hanna-Barbera. Ultraman Towards the Future, which was a 13-episode series in 1992, was a South Australia Film Corporation co-production, and this actually did air in the United States and had a toy line, so pretty notable for that. While it hasn't seen release on Blu-ray in the United States at all, it did get a release in Japan under its original Japanese title, Ultraman Great, which also, that is the name of the Ultraman, Ultraman Great. In 1993, following up that, an LA-produced Ultraman The Ultimate Hero was made to be made in the US, but it never actually aired in the US, which is a little awkward. But this introduced us to Ultraman Powered, and once again it had a Blu-ray in Japan, so you can find it online, but there is no official release currently. Continuing forth with the weird side stuff, the 1996 film Ultraman Zearth introduced us to Ultraman Zearth. This is a parody film of Ultraman. It takes a lot of the tropes and makes it sort of a parody. So with the international shows, with USA, Great, Powered, you could watch those as introductions. Zearth, you should watch this if you've seen Ultraman and know the tropes that it's doing a parody of. Same thing for its sequel, Ultraman Zearth 2, Superman Big Battle, Light and Shadow, which introduced Ultraman Shadow. If you've watched a recent Ultraman thing, you know why I mentioned this. This is a 2-film series, and both of these were released on DVD. However, I will advise the video quality on the DVD is very poor on the Mill Creek release. Check out my other videos for more details on that. But then finally, Ultraman found its foundation and began its proper Heisei era with 1996's Ultraman Tiga, lasting for 52 episodes. This also introduced to us Ultraman Tiga. This also began what was known as the TDG Trilogy, a series of 3 shows made by similar production crews, now without being in the same universe, that connect together as the TDG Trilogy, and that is a reference point for a lot of things. Ultraman Tiga is absolutely a great starting point. You get the longer episode run that is more reminiscent of the Showa Era, but you get the more character-based drama that you would see in more of the modern shows. It's really the turning point for Ultraman. If you haven't caught an Ultraman show before and you don't mind something that's 52 episodes, by all means, Tiga is a great starting point. There was an English dub that was partially produced for this by 4Kids, so Tiga may look familiar to those of us that watched the Fox box back in the day. But that dub has not resurfaced, while Ultraman Tiga is available on streaming, as well as having a DVD from Mill Creek. Going alongside that, Ultraman Tiga had a sequel film in 2000, Ultraman Tiga The Final Odyssey. That unfortunately has not seen release due to music rights problems. In 1997, we came out with Ultraman Dyna, which lasted 51 episodes, introduced us to Ultraman Dyna. As a twist, this took place 10 years after Ultraman Tiga, so it's the first connected show since the original Showa Era Ultraman shows. So that's why I've labeled it the Tiga Dyna universe, because it can't really be the TDG universe, because, well, as we'll talk about, guys, a different universe, but Tiga Dyna universe, because Dyna does take place after Tiga. And then following that up, the 1998 film, Ultraman Tiga and Dyna Warriors of the Starlight, take place after episode 26 of Dyna, that's included on the Dyna DVD set. The 2001 original video tokusatsu release of Ultraman Dyna Return of Hanajiro takes place after episode 48 of Dyna. And then Ultraman Tiga Gaiden, the Giant Resurrected in the Ancient Past, is an original video tokusatsu 18 years after Ultraman Dyna. So those are the correct order if you want to watch everything chronologically. And all but Final Odyssey are available on the Mill Creek DVDs, which is pretty cool. 1998 saw the release of Ultraman Gaia, lasting for 51 episodes. This was done in a similar style to Tiga and Dyna, but does take place in its own universe. This introduced us to Ultraman Gaia as well as Ultraman Agul, making the first show that had 2 consecutive Ultramans working together for most of the run. Not just a little cameo appearance, but something extensive. And there was multiple support teams, which is very unusual for Ultraman. Now, Gaia did have a crossover with Tiga and Dyna in Ultraman Tiga, Ultraman Dyna, Ultraman Gaia, The Battle in Hyperspace, coming out in 1999, taking place after episode 26 of Gaia. There also was Ultraman Gaia, Gaia Again, an original video tokusatsu that took place 1 year after the series. Both of those were included in the Ultraman Gaia DVD set. And that's what really connects the Tiga, Dyna, and Gaia together, is that one movie. Even though, like I said, Gaia is a separate universe. Now, there was no regular Ultraman series in 2000, but there was the direct-to-video series Ultraman Neos, lasting for 12 episodes. This introduced us to Ultraman Neos as well as Ultraseven 2-1, and this was kind of a neat little side series, but being direct-to-video, much lower budget than its Heisei contemporaries. So while you could watch, you could watch Tiga, Dyna, and Gaia separately, Neos is kind of one of those for the hardcores. It's not necessarily a great starting point, but it's kind of a neat show if you want to have it. 2001 brought the introduction of Ultraman Cosmos. Now, Ultraman Cosmos lasted 65 episodes. This is absolutely the longest single entry in the Ultra series. So, I don't recommend it as a starting point unless you really like long shows because of that runtime. However, it is pretty good if you're following up from Tiga, Dyna, and Gaia. Cosmos takes a lighter tone, it's a little bit more kid-friendly overall, and in general, it's kind of a nice series because Cosmos is more of a sympathetic Ultraman who wants to try to help the kaiju more than just destroy them. This also had several movies connected to it. Ultraman Cosmos: The First Contact takes place before the show. Ultraman Cosmos 2: The Blue Planet takes place after the show and introduces Ultraman Justice. Justice will be important in later future crossovers. And then there was the conclusion to the Cosmos saga with 2003's Ultraman Cosmos vs. Justice, the final battle. So Cosmos is going to be your kind of like, if you're really dedicated and want to watch 65 episodes and 3 movies, Cosmos is there. But, for some of us, me included, haven't taken that plunge yet because of that runtime. So now we get into a couple weird things from the 2000s of Ultraman. I wouldn't even be bringing these up except for the Ultraman in them have shown up in crossovers. So at the very least, I can tell you who they are. First of all, 1999 introduced Ultraman Nice. Ultraman Nice was in 41-minute commercials. Not even kidding, this guy has shown up. He's a canon Ultraman. Ultraman Nice really doesn't have that much story to him, but there was a continuing series of commercials for an extended period of time. However, if you want to find all the commercials with subtitles, tell me if you found them. I've been looking and I haven't had any luck. But Ultraman Nice comes from that. He's a more upbeat, lighthearted Ultraman because of that. Following that up, in 2003, Ultraman Boy's Coliseum debuted Ultraman Boy, which lasted for 260 short episodes. And this is essentially Ultraman Boy describing and explaining things for Ultraman for kids to understand and get into Ultraman. Once again, has not been able to find all 260 episodes, especially not with subs. But these two characters somehow continue to make appearances, and that's why they're getting mentioned here. Now, in 2004, Tsuburaya took Ultraman in a different direction with the Ultra N project. This was supposed to revitalize Ultraman and bring it to a different, wider audience, going for more mature storytelling with some darker themes and elements, but trying not to completely isolate kids because that Bandai money's real good. Unfortunately, it ended up isolating everybody because it wasn't in a time slot for adults, and kids didn't really like it that much, so it kind of ended prematurely. But this idea and the characters within would continue forward to future Ultraman projects. So first of all, 2004's Ultraman, also known as Ultraman the Next, introducing us to Ultraman the Next. This was a film that was originally planned to come out before Ultraman Nexus, but ended up coming out during the run, is a prequel to Nexus, and is part of the Ultraman Noah saga. And this film, I think, is actually a really good starting point if you want kind of a more modern take on Ultraman. So while you have kind of like Tiga has a bit of the Showa flair, Ultraman the Next is definitely 100% more of a mid-2000s modern. And that may be more approachable for some audiences, especially if you want some darker themes in your storytelling. But also, it keeps the upbeat, light, hopeful things about Ultraman. the main Ultraman character and the main host himself has a wife and kid, which is something we don't see again in Ultraman until this year's Ultraman Blazar. Ultraman the Next is a standalone film that leads into Ultraman Nexus, but if you watch it on its own, you still get the full experience. Plus, it enhances your viewing of Nexus if that's where you want to continue next. And speaking of Nexus from 2004, it only lasted 37 episodes. It was originally supposed to air in a primetime slot, but due to Ultraman Cosmos being more kid-friendly in that primetime slot, Nexus got bumped to the Saturday morning kids block, and that was not where it belonged because it is a much darker Ultraman show than probably any other, outside of the one we'll talk about in a moment. Ultraman Nexus takes a darker tone, and it takes a while to get used to. The actual support team is combative towards Ultraman in the beginning, and it doesn't seem like they even like each other that much. But the series progresses and grows over time, and provides some of the most interesting twists and storytelling that the franchise has ever seen. Nexus is my personal favorite Ultraman because of the uniqueness of it, but it may not work for everybody because it is that darker tone and it does sort of disrupt the normal formula. But that also can be a good thing, and I don't really recommend Nexus as a starting point. I know that's weird to say that it's prequel film. I'm like, yeah, that's a good way to get into Ultraman. Nexus may not be because it is so different. If you go from there and you're like, I want something just like this, all I can recommend you is Ultraseven X, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and that's not a whole lot. So I would recommend watching Nexus when you're 2 or 3 or 4 shows in and feel like you want to shake up. Now, of note, Nexus is very important for introducing us to Ultraman Nexus, Ultraman Noah, as well as the Dark Ultras, Dark Faust, Dark Mephisto, and Dark Zagi, kind of bringing forth the idea, Ultraman Shadow was kind of that, but Zearth was a parody, the idea of a Dark Ultra, and that is in the form of those 3 dark guys. So yeah, there's kind of an interesting theme that we'll see going forward as there are more darks in our future. In addition to that, if you do go to watch Nexus, there is 2 specials I do want to mention. The episode 29 director's cut is an hour-long cut of episode 29, featuring a lot of cut footage. Just replace that in your normal episode 29 viewing. There also is episode EX, which takes place after episode 31 and fills in some more gaps the show couldn't before its unfortunate early ending. And then in 2005, Ultraman Max came on the scene. This is kind of the most manic Ultraman show I've ever seen. You will never be able to predict what kind of episode you'll get. You'll never know if you're going to get something crazy, zany, or just something down to earth and standard. It's really weird, and it swings a pendulum crazier than any other Ultraman show. But for that reason, it can be super fun. Ultraman Max lasted 39 episodes and introduced us to Ultraman Max as well as Ultraman Xenon. So, 2 Ultramans, but Xenon was more of a cameo appearance than a full-on recurring role. But Max, that's one I'd also recommend when you've got a few Ultras under the belt, because if that's your first one, you may not want to see the rest of the franchise. But if you're looking to see something that covers every type of Ultraman story the whole franchise has to offer, that's Ultraman Max in a nutshell. So things have been pretty straightforward so far, huh? Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, the original Showa, from Ultraman to 80 are one universe minus Jonius. The Ultraman is separate, and Tiga and Dian are together, and Gaia crossed over with them. Alright, so here's Ultraman Mabius. This is where our continuity gets weird, okay? So bear with me. I think I've simplified it. 2006's Ultraman Mabius lasted for 50 episodes, introducing us to Ultraman Mabius as well as Ultraman Hikari, another dual Ultraman show. This takes place in the same original Ultraman universe that Ultraman through 80 took place in. But it also connects to Heisei stuff that's going to come later. So, here we go. By the way, Ultraman Mabius had a great DVD set that included everything but one movie, which had a separate release, so, yeah. Also, don't let the discount scare you. Watch my video on that for more. Alright, so in 2006, they did kind of an anniversary thing. Max celebrated some anniversaries like they did an Ultra Q throwback, but Mabius went all in on the anniversary, bringing back original Ultraman actors. So, it simultaneously takes place in the Showa universe and also connects to Heisei stuff. I'm just going to group it with the Showa universe, but I wanted to leave it here because of the connections to the Heisei. Here we go. So, series itself, it features returns of every Ultraman except for Taro, because for some reason that's just never worked out. In 2006, there was the Ultraman Mabius and Ultra Brothers movie taking place after episode 15, featuring, again, the return of the Ultra Brothers. The 2008 film Superior 8 Ultra Brothers is actually weird because it was made years after the show, but it actually takes place during the show. After episode 31, where Ultraman Mabius gets pulled from his universe into an alternate universe where Tiga, Dyna, Gaia, Ultraman, Jack, Seven, and Ace are the new Ultra Brothers. What's confusing is that all 8 actors are original, but 7 are from this alternate universe, and regular Mabius went over to that one. Alright, so after the series, there was the Ultraman Mabius Gaiden Hikari Saga, telling the story of Ultraman Hikari. Part 1 took place as a prequel to the series, Part 2 took place after episode 17, and Part 3 took place after episode 34. I recommend watching all of these after the series. Then in 2008, the Ultraman Mabius Gaiden Armored Darkness, which takes place after episode 50. And then in 2009, the Ultraman Mabius Gaiden Ghost Reverse, which takes place, hear me out, after another show, Mega Monster Battle Never Ending Odyssey. And it is a tie-in to the Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy Legend movie. So here is my recommendation for watching Ultraman Mabius. First of all, watch it. Mabius is one of the best shows, and it's a good introduction to the Showa Era. If you don't want to watch all the Showa Era series but get a feel for those characters, you get follow-ups to pretty much everybody, and it's really cool for that reason. In addition to that, the other movies show you glimpses of the Ultraman universe. In 2007, Ultraseven X was the first adult-aimed Ultra project. Where the Ultra N project was trying to bridge everybody, Ultraseven X is definitely more of a mature series. Not gritty, overly, like grrr, violence, anger kind of mature, but more of an adult theme to it in a dystopian society. This is a reimagining, of course, of Ultra 7 from the Showa Era and introduced Ultraseven X, though we never see that guy around anymore, which is really weird because he's pretty cool. This was a 12-episode series, and it did get a Blu-ray release by Mill Creek. Now we get to another weird point in time. After Mabius, after Ultraseven X, Subaraya wasn't really like, we can't do a full series. So they produced the Mega Monster Battle. First up, Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle was 13 episodes. This was essentially monsters fighting monsters. No Ultramans involved. This was popular enough to spawn a sequel in 2008, Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle Never Ending Odyssey, lasting for 13 episodes. Also, that Mabius Gaiden Ghost Reverse takes place after this show. This led into the 2009 film Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy Legend, introducing 2 characters you will see throughout the rest of the Ultraman franchise going forward, Ultraman Zero and Ultraman Belial. Now, while this is a sequel movie to Mega Monster Battle and features the cast of that show as well as their monster comrade, this actually begins a brand new era of Ultraman. While it's still the tail end of the Heisei era, this is what leads into our future Ultraman popularity boom. This is what brought Ultraman back in a lot of ways and actually laid the seeds before we got a new TV show. Ultraman Zero is one of the most popular characters in the franchise. If you want to see his origins, Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy Legend is the start of his story. So, this is a brand new starting point. In fact, I think this movie was the first Ultraman thing I actually sat down and watched, and it's probably the reason I'm an Ultraman fan in the first place. This is going to throw at you the Mega Monster Battle stuff. Showa Ultraman, Belial, Zero, all this other kind of characters pop up in this. You are not going to understand it 100% when you watch it the first time, if this is one of the first things you're watching for Ultraman. But when you go back and watch it years later, it's going to be like, wow, this is great. What a terrific film as an Ultraman fan. It's something you can start with and something you can revisit, and it'll be even better than before. Now, here's the fun part. If you're getting the Blu-rays, Mega Monster Battle, both seasons, plus the movie is one bundle, and then all the other Ultraman Zero stuff is another bundle. And that other bundle is going to be the follow-ups to that movie. There's the 2-episode Ultraman Zero vs. Darklop Zero, the Ultraman Zero Revenge of Belial film, which brings back Ultraman Belial, then Ultraman Zero Gaiden Killer the Beatstar, followed by the crossover film Ultraman Saga, which features Dyna and Cosmos. And then we also have Ultra Zero Fight, another complication. This was originally 23 short episodes compiled into 2 specials. If you want the official release of it, it's on the Ultraman Zero Chronicle as multiple episodes, but it is condensed down from the original. I recommend looking out for the 2 specials somewhere online, in addition to that Zero Chronicle if you want to see the full Ultra Zero Fight. But that's how you watch it officially. But with the Zero Saga concluded, the new generation of heroes saga of Ultraman begins. The New Generation Heroes saga is what I think we're still in, even though it seems like Ultraman Blazar might be trying to separate itself from it. The New Generation Heroes is where Bandai took a little bit more of a stock in the Ultraman franchise and putting some more money in, and things get very toyetic. So if you're not big on the huge toy marketing side, it's not too distracting, but it's definitely heavier in the series. So for example, in the Showa Era and Heisei Era, when an Ultraman do a transformation, pretty basic. Person holds up device, hits a button or something, it flashes, they turn into Ultraman. Whereas you start to see in the New Generation Era, longer, more drawn-out transformation sequences to show off the fancy toy features. If that bothers you, I'm sorry, but on the flip side, I think the New Generation Era is really approachable to new viewers. So while I do think starting with Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy Legend, that's a good movie to start with. However, if you want to start with a TV series that starts disconnected and sort of slowly introduces you to Ultraman concepts, 2013's Ultraman Ginga. This was a series that only lasted 11 episodes, introducing us to Ultraman Ginga. It also features Ultraman Taro as a support character in the form of a small vinyl figure. Show's a little weird, but there was a theater special which takes place after episode 6 and appears as episode 7 on the Blu-ray set. And there was a second theater special that's not as important and almost impossible to find online. Ultraman Ginga was popular enough to spawn a sequel series. Ultraman Ginga S debuted in 2014, lasting for 16 episodes and introducing us to Ultraman Victory. Now, an interesting distinction to note here. Ultraman Ginga featured no support team. It was just Hikaru and his friends trapped at a school for most of the run. Ultraman Ginga S did introduce a support team, even though their actual weapons against kaiju were minimal. This was kind of a bringing back to the traditional Ultraman style that had been missing in Ginga. There also was the Ultraman Ginga S the movie, and then the 13-episode Ultra Fight Victory, which was compiled into a single special. Now that was all included in the Blu-ray set, minus the second Ginga theater special. However, if you want to jump in with an Ultraman show that has a support team from the beginning, references past series to give you a glimpse at other shows, 2015's Ultraman X is definitely the right ticket. Ultraman X sees a digital life form version of Ultraman. Ultraman X himself is digital based, and so there's some really cool technology. This only lasted 22 episodes, so it's absolutely one of the most approachable series in terms of runtime, and it had a movie, Ultraman X the movie, Here Comes Our Ultraman. Now, it does have a crossover with Ginga and Victory, as well as their supporting cast, so it's kind of fun to keep going from Ginga onward. And that is a continuing thing in the New Generation Era, the more frequent crossovers. But each of them work standalone because each take place on a different Earth, so you don't have to watch the previous ones, and you'll just get a glimpse at some other characters. 2016's Ultraman Orb celebrated an anniversary. Ultraman Orb does not feature the typical defense team, and doesn't feature a typical Ultraman. This is a human who becomes Ultraman, and borrows the powers of past Ultramans. It also introduced one of the most popular villains slash anti-heroes of the franchise, Juggless Juggler. He may not be an Ultra Warrior, but boy, is that guy one of the most popular characters this franchise has ever spawned. Speaking of popularity, Orb did spawn the 12-episode Orb the Origins Saga prequel. I highly recommend watching this after the series, because if you watch it before the series, you're going to get spoiled of some of the twists in the series itself. So it's definitely better to watch after you've seen the show. This also introduced the character of the war deity, Queen Izana. Once again, will come up in future crossovers. Some of these weirder, kind of offbeat characters you never expect to see again, they start showing up a lot. There also was the Ultra Fight Orb 8-episode miniseries, which was compiled into a single special, takes place after the show, before the movie, and then of course Ultraman Orb the movie, which was a crossover with Ultraman X, but just Daichi and Ultraman X, not the whole cast of the previous show. Now 2017's Ultraman Geed is one of the more popular shows, but not one I recommend seeing sight unseen of the Ultraman franchise. While it does introduce Ultraman Geed, he is the son of Ultraman Belial. So if you haven't seen the stuff with Ultraman Belial, you're going to be a little bit lost. Also, Ultraman Zero is a support character in the show, so you want to have at least seen the Zero Saga. You could go from the Zero movies that I laid out, and then jump to Geed, totally an option, or you can just start from Zero and go forward. But Geed does follow on that history. They do a lot of flashbacks, they do a lot of explaining, but if you don't really know who Zero and Belial is, you lose a lot of the meaning behind it. There also was the Ultraman G movie, Connect the Wishes, which took place after the series and featured Orb and Juggler's Juggler returning. 2018's Ultraman Rube. Rube is a family story. Ultraman Rosso and Ultraman Blue are brothers. They're humans that become Ultramen. They have a sister and a father, and it's a nice little family dynamic. But they are mostly working on their own. That being said, Ultraman Rube the movie, Select the Crystal of Bonds, introducing Ultrawoman Grigio and Ultraman Tregear, does start to connect things together with other Ultras, because Ultraman G does make a cameo appearance in that film, and it becomes sort of a crossover at that point. And then in 2019, Ultra Galaxy Fight New Generation Heroes was a 13-episode series with a compilation special combining all the episodes plus extra footage. I recommend just watching the special. This was the first major crossover of the Ultra Galaxy Fight series that we see still to this day as this side special that brings together all of the Ultraman shows and characters into one giant storyline. It's a lot if you've never seen Ultraman before, but if you have, and if you've been keeping up with stuff, it can be pretty great. Plus, it introduces you to some of the more obscure characters, such as Ultraman Reboot. Ultraman Reboot debuted in the Malaysian animated series Upin and Ipin, and it was canonized in this special, and has now become a recurring character in the Ultra Galaxy Fight series. This is available for streaming on YouTube. Like I said, check out the director's cut version, the compilation, and there is an English dub produced in Japan. Ultraman Taiga, airing in 2019, lasted 26 episodes, and introduced us to Ultraman Taiga, Ultraman Titus, and Ultraman Fuma. The main villain was Ultraman Tregear, who came out in the Rube movie, was in the New Generation Heroes Ultra Galaxy Fight, and is now the main villain here. The thing with the Taiga series is it's actually one of the only main Ultraman shows to not be available. There's no Mill Creek Blu-ray, there's no official streaming. You can find fan subs online, but there's no official way to watch it, which is a shame, and I hope that gets corrected soon. However, you can watch Ultraman Taiga the movie, New Generation Climax, on UltramanConnection.com, which is a globally available website that has free streaming of several Ultraman shows and movies. And this is one of them, and this is actually the first one we're talking about, which is why I'm bringing it up here. Ultraman Connection is free, so make an account, watch some Ultraman stuff. The coolest part about this, as I mentioned, the YouTube thing, we're talking into an era now where you can pretty much watch everything forward for free on YouTube or Ultraman Connection, or both. After Ultraman Taiga takes place, Ultra Galaxy Fight The Absolute Conspiracy was released as 10 episodes, but there is a compilation special. This is available on YouTube and Ultraman Connection, and also has an English dub. This was the big crossover. The previous Ultra Galaxy Fight New Generation Heroes focused on the New Generation Heroes from Ginga through Rosso and Blue. This started bringing in all kinds of people. Great, powered, some of the anime people like Jonius, some of the more obscure characters like Reboot and the War Deity. There is a lot of stuff in these specials and a lot of deep cuts, and a lot of things I didn't know about until watching them, which gave me a gateway into the Ultra franchise. And it has shaped me calling out all these Ultra names as they debuted, so that you know where they came from in case you saw them and thought they were cool and wanted to see what show they were from. This all comes full circle. The Absolute Conspiracy also started the Absolutian arc. A alternate species to the Ultras, known as the Absolutians, are fighting for dominance of the universe. And they fight the Ultras as kind of evil Ultras, starting with Absolute Tartarus, who debuts in this special. So now we've come to Ultraman Z, which I think is our next good entry point. Ginga started a new thing, but Z is kind of a weird clean break / continuation. So, the Ultraman Taiga movie, which I talked about previously, was a crossover between every Ultraman from Ginga through Taiga, including their host actors. So it kind of capped off that era. Ultraman Z also features crossovers from Ultraman G and Ultraman Zero. You can just watch the 25 episodes of Ultraman Z as a single solitary experience, and there is some nice surprises and twists and turns within. If you're caught up on your Ultraman lore, it's great. If you're not, it's also great. It is a fantastic starting point for the series. In addition to that, it is not only streaming on Ultraman Connection, but also on YouTube in Japanese and English subtitles, as well as a brand new English dub that just finished airing on the YouTube channel, which is actually produced in the US and uses a lot of actors that you might recognize from other anime dubs. Ultraman Z is absolutely a great start. Now we have to move forward with the Ultra Galaxy fights. So we're going in chronological order of the continuity in these specials. It's going to get weird with the release dates, but we're going to do it this way to make it simple. In 2023, the Ultraman Regulos 6-episode series properly introduces Ultraman Regulos. Now, this was released on YouTube as well as Ultraman Connection. Connection also has compiled the 6 episodes into 2 specials if you want to watch it that way, and there is a Japanese-produced English dub. This tells the story of Ultraman Regulos, an amnesiac Ultraman who learns the martial arts style known as Cosmo Beast style. It's a fun special, and it sets up future events. This, of course, came out after his initial debut, but chronologically, this is the debut of Ultraman Regulos. Now, in 2022, Ultra Galaxy Fight: The Destined Crossroad came out, and this had a prologue as well as 10 episodes that were compiled into a special. The release schedule for this is a little weird. You can find the prologue and all the episodes on YouTube in Japanese and in English, but the combined version is only available as a video rental you have to pay for on Ultraman Connection. However, Ultra Galaxy Fight: The Destined Crossroad is sort of the conclusion of Act 1 of the Absolutian saga. It introduces Absolute Diavolo and Absolute Teton. It brings back characters such as Chuck Scott and Beth from Ultraman USA, who we never thought would come back. Ultraman Boy, Ultraman Nice. A lot of these characters I've mentioned all show up in here. Again, this is really for the Ultraman fans that want to see everything kind of collide together into a big old giant battle. And then following that up, the Ultraman Regulos First Mission special, which released on YouTube just recently, is a 2-episode special that shows Ultraman Regulos' first mission following the events of the Destined Crossroad. Now from there, we're going to backtrack in release schedule, but go forward in continuity to the Guts Select universe. This is a connected universe similar to the Tiga and Dyna universe. It only encompasses 2 series, and it features connecting tissue because they take place in that same universe. First up, 2021's Ultraman Trigger New Generation Tiga. This is a 25-episode series. I don't want to call it a remake of Tiga. It kind of takes a lot of elements from Ultraman Tiga, a lot of elements from Ultraman Tiga Final Odyssey, and makes a new version of it. This also would have a crossover with Ultraman Reboot, and that would follow up from the events of Destined Crossroad, and also feature Absolute Tartarus and Absolute Diavolo. There also was the Ultraman Trigger the movie, Episode Z, which did feature Ultraman Z returning. So yeah, it's not really a clean break, but if you start with Z, you can follow into Trigger. The other thing is that the series is streaming on Ultraman Connection and YouTube for free, but the movie is only a paid rental on Ultraman Connection. Now, taking place 7 years later, coming out 1 year later, 2022's Ultraman Decker, which is 25 episodes, is a reimagining of Ultraman Dyna. Trigger is kind of like the alternate universe of Tiga. Decker is kind of its own thing. It takes elements of Dyna, very few elements of Dyna, kind of like being a Trigger sequel is an element of Dyna being a Tiga sequel, but it kind of does its own thing and has a really cool origin story involving Dyna. You don't have to have seen Dyna to enjoy the show, but having seen both, it is pretty cool too. Now, Decker was, of course, streamed on YouTube and Ultraman Connection, and its sequel movie, Ultraman Decker Finale, Journey to the Beyond, is available as a rental on Ultraman Connection. Now, you can watch Decker without watching Trigger, just like you can watch Dyna without watching Tiga. Decker recaps everything you need from Trigger. And then that leads us to 2 recent things. The Shin Ultraman film, which was released in 2022 in Japan, 2023 here. This is a reimagined original Ultraman as a standalone movie. It is a great introduction to the tenets and the facets of Ultraman, while giving a new span for fans who have been around a while. Now, unfortunately, the way to watch this movie is a little complex, because the US release Blu-ray and DVD apparently has subtitle issues. Now, while filming this, I don't have the Blu-ray in hand, but I will be doing a full video on that. I don't recommend buying it until you've seen my video, because I will talk about if those subtitle issues have carried forward to the mass release. But the actual digital release you can buy on YouTube doesn't have the subtitle issues and has proper subs, so that's good. It also does have an English dub, so that also is mileage may vary there. And then, of course, the brand new Ultraman Blazar, which at the time of this recording has not aired yet, but I am very excited for it. This new series is going to be breaking a lot of the tenets of the New Generation era. It will be having a simplified transformation. The main character, the Ultraman host, is the captain of the defense team, as opposed to just being a member of it, which is a new thing for sure. And on top of that, it does seem to be going in a different direction than the previous New Generation series. That means Ultraman Blazar is probably my #1 pick for joining Ultraman at this time. If you're somebody who likes watching a weekly show, it's going to be airing weekly on YouTube. It also will be receiving an English dub as well as other dubs as well. They're really pushing it. It's going to be great. It's going to be on YouTube and Ultraman Connection. I highly recommend checking that out. It seems like an absolutely great entry point into Ultraman. But if you're wanting to have a completed show, I hope you take in consideration the others I have recommended. So that brings us to the end of the viewing guide. Of course, Ultraman is not done. It is going forward. Like I said, Blazar just started today. Ultraman is amazing. If you haven't had a chance to experience it, I hope my guide has made it easy. While a lot of these shows are available on Blu-ray and DVD from Mill Creek, that's not the case in every region, so I hope you'll be able to find it wherever it's available in your region. Ultraman, by and large, is the most available tokusatsu franchise in the world. Almost anywhere you live, you can find most of the shows officially available, or with a quick VPN, find them on YouTube as well. The fact that Ultraman has a YouTube in multiple different languages, and the fact that it has Ultraman Connection as well, is just great, because you can actually find Ultraman without too much effort, and that is an incredible thing. So, on that note, go out and watch Ultraman. That is the main point of this video. I hope I've given you a guide. I hope I've cleared things up. And if you did enjoy it, leave me a comment, hit the like button, hit the subscribe notification bell, because there will be more of these guides in the future for other franchises. I'm very excited for the future of Ultraman, and I hope this guide is going to be out there to help you enjoy it as well. On that note, check out my live streams here on the channel, Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about Ultraman news and all kinds of good stuff. Also be sure to check out my social media at Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Soundout12, as long as those are still applicable. Check out my awesome graphic designer on Twitter at DarkClaw643. You can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for Ultraman interviews. Yes, several interviews, reviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.